Okay, I borrowed this Sorby Steady Pro system from a friend, Simon. Thank you, Simon. And I'm going to give it a go. I've started doing this large piece of sycamore that hopefully will end up being a hollow form, and I'm just going to try and see what it is like taking out some of the meat. I've adjusted the slot between the rollers to take this tool that I very rarely ever use because it's a bit scary, which is the Hunter, I think. I've set it up so that it's on dead center, and it should be gripped so that it doesn't snatch. So I'll just get my mask on and see how that works. It is slightly strange using this. You have to pull up against the top bar to make sure the tool is locked in place. I think you could get used to it. It's just a bit counterintuitive. I didn't really get on with the that carbide, so I think I'll swap now to the Woodcut hollowing system and see how that performs in the rig. Well, bingo. Side cutting was extremely successful. The tool felt nice and stable, no fear of it kicking out in your hand. So I think for a beginner or somebody who's just pushing their hollowing a bit further, initial thought is that's really good. So I tried a traditional bowl gouge, which again felt really weird. You also have to have a really long shaft on the tool to actually get it to go in because of the size of the rig. So back cutting was moderately successful, but again felt really weird. So I thought I'd try the Crown hollower, the shielded cutter, with the smaller shaft, so I had to reset the rollers to make sure that it was a tight fit. And again, I didn't really rate that. I did manage to get a cut, don't get me wrong, and as you can see, you've got the reasonable shavings. I guess it just feels strange, that's all. So I pretty rapidly went back to the Woodcut hollower to hog out a load of material very quickly. Extremely efficient and effective when you can get that tool working properly. Now I've shifted the head at an angle so that I can more easily get in and start doing the undercut, again with the Woodcut tool. Again, felt safe, felt secure, and once you get the cut right, it took out large amounts of material very quickly and safely. And then as the undercut was getting more extreme, I popped in one of the Kelton hollowers with the bent end just to see how that felt. Again, it was okay, but I felt it sort of restricted the way that I would be holding the tool normally. So I didn't really get on with that one either. So I thought I might as well play with everything. So I got out my fairly recently acquired Easy Wood carbide curved tool, which has got a negative rake cutter on it. In order to make that fit, I obviously had to adjust the rollers so that it worked with the thinner, flat rectangular section of the Easy Wood tool. And that worked really well. It allowed me to get to the underside of the lip using the carbide on its side and on the inside of it to do the undercut, and that worked really well. And then I tried the final one, which was the Simon Hope hollowing rig system with the carbide cutter set at an angle, just to again take a bit more meat out of the undercut, and that worked really well. But of course, I think it's time now to stick that into the Hope rig and see how that works as a comparison. So I bolted on the framework and set up the rig. Had to move bits of cameras and microphone out of the way in order to get the space. It's very easy to actually set up once you've done it once or twice, and then you use like the clamps to set up the laser to an offset to the cutting tip, so you know where you are. I think I set this to about 10 mil. I was not wanting to be too aggressive. One tip is to make sure that you move the tool rest in as close as possible to the face of the bowl to make sure that the overhang gets as much support as possible. And you also need to make sure that you've lifted the tool rest so that the cutting tip is on dead centre, even though the rig has been set up so that the centre of the arm is on dead centre. There is a little bit of slack, and it does move down at the cutting tip below dead centre. But you give it a little nudge up and it's dead easy to set it up, and then as you can see here, you just hollow away. It does require a little bit of effort, but compared to the hard work of crouching down with any of the other hollowing systems, yeah, this is really good. Expensive, but worth it if you're going to do a number of these. And you can see here glimpses of the tool through the holes in the actual bowl, with the wood dust chippings coming out of it, and that didn't phase it at all, even when the cutting tip was bouncing off the hole. You just have to steady it a little bit more. As you hollow different parts of the bowl, you do need to reset the where the laser is, and sometimes rotate the cutting tip a little bit, because you need to make sure that the laser is set relative to where you're cutting. And if you set it to the side of the cutting tip, then you need to reset it if you start to cut at the end of the cutting tip. Fairly obvious, really. Just in case things have shifted, because there is a bit of rattling and rolling, it's worth doing a thickness check manually every now and again. So I now fitted the Hope scraper, which I had freshly sharpened and rotated at an angle of about 25 degrees down. I quite like it if it was a negative rake high-speed steel cutter on there, but just rotating it down is good enough. And I use that to smooth out the bottom and the sides. I did end up with a bit of a dome in the bottom, which I needed to flatten out, so I've just used a square carbide to get rid of that dome in the middle. And then out came the Ryobi rotary tool, the Dremel-like one, to just remove the thin sections where the underside of the bark was. The little Ryobi 4-volt system is very good for more delicate work, but this was a bit thicker than I'd expected. So I've swapped to the Ryobi 18-volt one with a flexible cord, and that's much more manful, and that sorted this out very easily with some burrs, carbide burrs. So I've reversed it onto the large Axminster cold jaws in expansion mode, and also done some copper fills in the splits that opened up, and then got ready to turn off the foot and tidy up. And then before taking the nub out in the centre, just make sure that it's flat with a slight concave, so that it sits nicely when you put it down. So sanded and wet sanded with oil, and then I textured the bottom as well, and that was the job done. Overall, the Simon Hope hollowing system, of course, reigns supreme. But for a less confident turner who only wants to do some modest amounts of hollowing, I think the Sorby HollowPro certainly has a place, and it does make hollowing less stressful and safer.